and welcome back to Calathea. In the last episode, we built this Spanish-inspired high-density town based on cities like Barcelona, with these square and rectangular pockets of medium-rise high-density housing. It's following the Mediterranean theme with the terracotta roofs, and I've tried to keep the commercial and facility buildings as on brand as possible. If you watch my last episode closely, you may notice that there are some extra houses in here. I went in just before starting this episode to add some more housing because it's still the highest demand, and this episode isn't going to include any residential builds at all. So I wanted to make sure that they are satisfied in the meantime while I get on with today's episode, which is building an oil industry area. This is kind of only the second time that I've worked with the oil industry. I've done it once as kind of a test to see what the assets were like and what the kind of ratio of raw materials to processing buildings are, and I'm not going to pretend that I know what I'm doing with it, but I already have the area of the map picked out, and it will mean that we have every single type of industry area on this map, so we can start putting in some unique factories. So this is the area that we're going to be using for the oil industry area. As you can see, there's some fairly large deposits on the end of this piece of land here and by the base of the mountains on the other side of the bay. But there are also some oil deposits under the sea here. So I'm also going to be using some water-based drilling assets. I don't want this area to become too much of an eyesore for the people that live down here. But this isn't exactly the tourist end of this map. That is going to be much further over that way, so I'm not too worried about it impeding on the view too much. But what I do need to do is make room for a cargo ferry terminal. Now, I mentioned at the end of the last episode that I was going to be putting in a cargo transport method. While my go-to is using a cargo train terminal, the train system is already under a lot of pressure on this map because there's only one line in and out, and I don't want to add too much extra onto that, so I thought I would give a ferry terminal a go. Now, I will be honest and say that I've never used a cargo ferry terminal before, so this could all go disastrously wrong, but I think this is going to be the kind of episode where I learn as I go. I'm going to put down the roadmap and then walk you through what I've got planned. Okay, so this is probably going to be my most unhinged build to date because this roadmap is just utter chaos. I really don't know what I'm doing with this. I'm working with some very unusual terrain, especially along the bottom of these mountains, and it's actually quite hilly over here. You wouldn't know that by looking at it from this angle, but there's actually quite a lot of differences in terrain height in this bay area. So I've tried my best. I don't know how good it is, but I've tried my best. I put a road going through the mountain from this little turnaround down here all the way through to the ore industry area, because I feel like it's likely that the trucks will be going from one industry area to another, especially when it comes to the cargo ferry terminal, which is going to be down here. So this should give them a different route of travel to get to this bit down here rather than having to go through this road, which I imagine will become very busy. I've left this bit empty for now because some of the assets are quite large and I don't want to put a roadmap in and then have to remove it all again because the pieces are too big. So I will do the roads there as I go. In this middle section, I imagine this will become a place for unique factories in the future, as it's right next to 2 of the industry areas and not too far away from the farming one as well. I thought this was probably the best place to put it, although it does put all of the industry up one end of the map, so that will probably cause problems as well, I'm sure. So now that I've got a roadmap down, I'm going to get stuck into building. So my predictions were right, and this is one of the most unhinged builds I've ever done because there is no plan with the roads or the buildings or anything, and it looks like a 5-year-old could have done this. Not my proudest work, but I feel like I've put enough buildings on each side that they won't necessarily need to travel between the 2 areas that often. Obviously, I had said originally that I was going to put the cargo ferry terminal down here, but I think I've changed my mind about that and I'm actually going to put it over here instead. Now, originally I chucked all of the water and sewage pumps down here, but it was starting to pollute the drinking water, and obviously having an oil farm here probably is not the best place to be sourcing your drinking water from. Move the drinking water pumps to the other side of the mountain because there's not going to be anything up here. And then I've just put the outlet down here because having that inside the oil area isn't such a big deal. Now down here, I was thinking of putting a unique factory of some sort, and I am going to do a little bit of detailing with various industry buildings and props. Obviously I'm working with a very unusual space here, so I'm not sure quite how much I'm going to be able to do to salvage this, but I'm going to try my hardest. So the first thing I'm going to do is decide which unique factory to put down here. So I've decided to go with the shipyard unique factory, mainly because it actually sits on water and it felt perfect that I'd carved out this area already. So this unique factory requires glass, plastic, metal and wood. Luckily they can get at least 3 of those materials from really close by, but the wood is coming from a lot further away, so it's gonna probably add a lot more traffic onto this end of the map. So now I'm gonna go around and do a little bit of detailing. the level of detail that I want to go into this industry area. I didn't want to go too overboard. There's going to be a huge amount of trucks using these roads. I didn't want to make it too difficult for them to get around because they already look like they're struggling a little bit in this intersection down here. So I may need to create some ring roads and make less dead ends. Back to those trucks are getting so stuck, I'm going to do that right now. Hopefully that will work a little bit better for them. They'll be able to go all the way around now rather than turning around and coming straight back out, but it looks like they are still doing exactly that. So obviously there's a lot of different oil-based industry buildings for each different stage of the refinery process, and I've tried to put some other buildings around it that aren't necessarily related to the oil industry but look like they would belong in that kind of area, if that makes sense. So down here, for example, this is a row of the nicest looking industry assets that I have. These three are custom assets from the workshop and this one is a vanilla asset. In my ore industry area, I did a kind of head office park, and I like to think that this is kind of the same, but this time they're stuck right in the middle of all of the actual production rather than being up at one end far away from everything. So there's a few various industry and office buildings back here. I'm sure these will remove themselves over time because they are really struggling to want industry right now, but they obviously need it for the commercial, so I do feel like I'm fighting a bit of a losing battle, but I keep telling myself it's part of the city build experience. There's a few very small industry assets dotted in between in these kind of oddly shaped gaps, and then there's a few more offices back here. I've used these car parks in places where I wasn't quite sure what to do because they add entertainment value to the area and that keeps them happy. So I was hoping that that might have multiple benefits. There's a few storage and refinery facilities back here. I haven't really done much with this side yet because this is where the cargo port's going to be, so I didn't want to fill up this area before putting that in, just in case I had a wave of inspiration. Down here is a couple of recycling plants. Probably don't need two, but I thought it's better to have more than not enough, and they look like they kind of belong on this very grotty industrial area. So I put a few of these very small industrial assets alongside it. They're just generic assets, and like I mentioned, they'll probably delete themselves, but I thought they fit that space quite nicely. They look a little bit like generators and they look like they are part of the thing next door, so we're just going to pretend that they're connected. Over this side, I put a warehouse in the middle and a few generic industrial buildings either side and some car parks in between. This is a generic industrial asset and it looks like it's almost like a storage yard for the shipyard, so I thought I'd put that next to it. I've also tried to use keys to even out the terrain a little bit. I did have some issues with the key at the other end of this section of the industry area, which you probably just saw in the time lapse, but it was all to do with a faulty node which has now been fixed. I didn't really do too much down here because these are already quite busy as it is, with lots of the smoke pillars with loads of oil drums and containers in the yard, so I just put a couple of little generic industry assets down here and another recycling yard there. Down here is where I had the issues. It was that node there that was causing all of the problems, but it's as good as we're going to get it for now. Obviously there's a little bit of terrain peeking out there, but we are going to ignore that. It's a little bit steep here and I'm not expecting anyone to actually walk down that, so we're not treating this as if it's a road. But I put some generic industry buildings down here. This one is actually called Plastimold, which I thought was quite fitting for an oil industry area. Obviously it's not an oil building, but it feels like it fits in this kind of place. I didn't mention this earlier, but I also put an oil power station back here because they were really desperate for energy. I didn't want to have pylons going all over the place, so I thought what better to do than to use the natural resources of the area and put in one of these where it's far, far away from all the residential areas and it's not going to be an eyesore. There's a few more generic industry buildings up here, but they are not very big at all, and I just wanted to fill in the gaps between these tiny oil pumps. Obviously this looks a little bit weird, and I'm not going to say that industry is my strong suit. I think ore and oil I definitely need a bit more practice with, but I'm happy with where we've got it to so far. There's lots of trucks on the road, and hopefully this will be producing some more stuff for the commercial buildings in the rest of the city. So now it's time to get onto the cargo hub. So like I mentioned earlier, it's going to go on this piece of land down here. I might need to do a little bit of terrain adjustment just to move this beach back. I'll try not to flood everything in the process. So I'm going to put the cargo terminal in and then come back to walk you through it. Okay, so here is our cargo ferry harbour. It's getting some heavy use already, which I'm really happy to see. I've had quite a few ships coming in and out as I've been building this, and I believe there's another one on its way in now. So it's really great to see that so many goods are being imported and exported. So hopefully this should fix our commercial problem. I did try to do a tiny bit of detailing down the front here. Obviously the terrain I'm working with isn't great. I moved some of these assets to over here because the terrain was very steep, and I just put in a key here and did a little bit of kind of nice detailing up here to make it look like this is where the workers go to have their lunch and stuff. I don't think anyone will actually go up there and use that, but it looks like they can. This space here I'm not really sure what to do with. I might just put some trees in there because I don't really think there's any more assets that need to be put in, but it does look a little bit strange that just being so empty, and I don't want to put anything else in this section that's going to put more traffic on the road, so maybe putting something very simple in would be best. I also put in a fire station and a police station as well because they were complaining about crime issues, and I'm worried that something's going to set on fire at some point, and the nearest fire station is all the way over here somewhere. So this police station actually fits really well with this type of build. It's from the workshop, it's very long and very thin, but it looks like an industrial building. So it's actually perfect for putting into this gap here where this parking lot was. Again, there's some more gaps around here. I might just fill these with trees again because I don't want to add more traffic onto these roads because this is getting very backed up now. But I'm happy with how much use it's getting so far. So this industry area ended up being a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be, but I'm very happy with how it's turned out. I feel like it's sufficiently hidden away from the rest of the residents down here. You can kind of see it poking over the horizon, but you're never going to get somewhere that's completely free of industry, so I'm not too concerned about that. And I mean, these guys have an amazing view out this way, so I wouldn't be too concerned about having that off to one side. I'm sure that these roads will cause me massive traffic problems in the future, but hopefully it should take some of the pressure off of the one highway that we have coming in and out of this map. Yeah, it might bring some of the traffic up this way, but that will hopefully mean less down the other end. Obviously this district is a very, very long way from some of our other districts. It's pretty much the northernmost point of this map that's actually usable other than these islands. So for example, if someone down in Primrose Heights was to work up here, that is a really long way to go to work. Like I mentioned before, this section in the middle here is most likely going to be unique factories. They are very, very large assets, so they need a lot of space. So I'll probably flatten out the area in the middle there and put a few of the unique factories down. Obviously, I'm not going to put all of them all the way up here. There's still plenty of room on the rest of the map for another kind of business park to go, but I think this is going to be an exciting thing to do in the future. So the last thing I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to add in a metro that goes from this part of the oil industry area to the residential district next door, because there's a huge amount of people driving from that district to this one to go to work. And currently there's no way to get to this district via public transport. So people can get into the district next door using the train line. So hopefully if I put a metro station nearby, take a lot of the private vehicles off the road. Okay, so there is now a metro station within the industry area. Hopefully people will use this to get in and out of work. In some of my games it's been really successful and in others it hasn't. So I'm interested to see how this one goes. But there's 2 stations within this district and I don't think I've officially given this district a name yet, so that might be a job for someone in the comments. But it looks like there's some people going down there, and the other end of the line is right next to the train station. So when people come in and out of this district on the train, they can go straight to the metro and they can use that to get into the centre of the town, or they can use it to get out to the oil industry area. I'm quite happy with what I made today, even though it's a bit all over the place and a little bit ugly in places. I kind of like it. And I like that it's spanning across 2 different areas. That's something that I haven't really done before. I actually quite like it rather than having it all condensed in one space. Hopefully it should provide a ton of jobs and the goods for the commercial buildings so they don't keep deleting themselves. So I'm going to be coming back in before the next episode and doing some more housing, because housing is still the highest demand despite everything that we're doing. They're still wanting more places to live. I need to give them what they want and put some more housing in, as we're not going to be doing any more housing specific builds from now on. But I might put some of the extra footage up on TikTok and YouTube Shorts, although I am still very busy with my day job at the moment, so I may be a little bit quiet for a while, but I should be back up and running with a normal Paloma Valley episode on Thursday. The last episode was some first person walkthroughs, so if you've been watching that series and you haven't seen that episode yet, make sure to go and give it a watch because it looks so good from the ground. It really gives you a different perspective and it makes me very happy about the stuff that I've built so far. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. It was definitely one of my worst builds, but I had fun making it and it was good to try something new and to work with new forms of transport and a new industry type. So thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.